Good morning, everybody. It's MSP Confidential again. My name is Luis Giraldo, your host this week. And this week I have the wonderful, insightful, and talented Carolyn April of GTIA, the Global Technology Industry Association, joining us for a little debrief on the state of the channel. Carolyn, so good to have you again. We chatted last year on the state of the channel last year. Back when it was this other organization called CompTIA, long forgotten at this point. Now it's GTIA. How have you been? I hope you've been well.
Oh boy, yeah, I'm well. We've had a lot of change in the last few months here, and that's been a whirlwind. Let's just put it that way. But I think going well. We're really excited to be an association unto itself now. We don't have another part of the business, and we can focus at GTA on our membership and growing it, and some of the charitable works that we're going to be doing in the industry. And it's been an exciting time. Busy, crazy busy, but very exciting time. So I'm excited to be back on the show, though.
That's awesome. Well, and I think one of the member benefits, speaking to the membership, that has been, I think, one of the most valuable things over the years has been some of the industry research and data that you guys actually put out, namely the State of the Channel report. This study of the channel is something that I think you spend obviously a lot of time thinking about, collating all the surveys from people. Tell me a little bit about sort of the background of the state of the channel, how it comes about, how many people are you surveying, and what's been sort of the overarching trends tracking over the years.
Sure. Yes, this now goes back into my CompTIA days. But we've been doing the State of the Channel study for, I think we're in year 12 now.
Hmm.
So we've got quite a bit of data, and it's funny, you go back and you look at like the first one that we did, and you can compare the data to today and see some changes that are interesting. But I will say this, the channel is sort of a small, iterative, slow moving um, part of the tech economy. But they do move, forward. It's just not necessarily overnight, but it's been an interesting trajectory to follow. The study itself is a survey of channel companies, so mostly executives, business owners, some of the heads of sales and the heads of tech within those companies who are either in MSP businesses, they're solution providers, they are traditional resellers, they can be, consultants, they can be, any of the various flavors that you see today of channel firms in the ecosystem. We also do this study internationally, so we field the study in North America, and that's mainly the data we'll talk about today. But we also have data collected from the other five regions right now that where GTIA has membership, and that would be UK and Ireland, in DACH, which is the Germany area, in Benelux, which Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, in Australia, New Zealand, and then also in ASEAN, which is a collection of, I don't know, maybe 10 different countries in Asia. So we have data for those regions as well, that's accessible. But like I said, we'll probably talk about North America today. And as far as methodology goes, it was 400 completes, which is typically what we do every year, 400 respondents.
Okay. Varying sizes, spectrum of maturity, I assume.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. We have quotas that we set up with all of our surveys so that you're not getting all companies of the same stripes. So we have quotas around size of company, and we max out at, we've had so many companies that are of a certain size, we no longer accept any more survey results from those companies. Same goes for what did I say, company size, and then we do company type. So we can segment by the various types of channel firms, like I mentioned, MSPs or solution providers or resellers or telecom agents, whatever bucket you fall into. Um, and so yes, the data is pretty evenly balanced across the whole subset of channel.
Cool. So some of the key stats right at the get-go of the report are the growth. I think the projected IT services spending growth at 9%, and this is I guess a Gartner figure to some extent, but you must
Right.
you probably validate some of this in your own I guess what MSPs or some of the channel vendors are reporting in their own projections for the year, right?
Yeah, we do. We usually use the big Gartner number every year to give us the kind of size of the global tech economy and what spending looks like and what growth year over year looks like. They've got that down. They're very good at doing those numbers. So no need to do them ourselves. But it does map with some of the things we're seeing in the channel. So you'll see this particular number that we're talking about here, 1.73 trillion. If you break it down, the services piece of that is significant. It's probably the biggest piece of Gartner's total picture for the tech economy. And that mirrors directly with what we're seeing among the channel respondents to our study is they are
Sure.
much more invested in services as part of their revenue driving, and part of their business than they are in strictly product sales today. So, as goes what the larger economy toward a more services orientation, we're seeing the channel downstream doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I assume also that as some of the things like AI go from hype cycle to actual services implementation, some of the revenue growth projections are maybe dependent on some of these new technologies and how they get rolled out. And I think maybe there's an overall positivity around those things when it's early in the cycle of a new technology. And maybe that's an insight that you have just from 12 years of doing the report, that at the beginning of any cycle or hype of a specific technology, there seems to be a lot of positivity around it from a growth projection standpoint, but maybe it evens out over time.
Yeah, we call that the reality check of year two or year three.
Mm,
We saw it with cloud computing. In the beginning, there was a lot of trepidation in the very beginning, like how does cloud affect me as a channel company? Do I just sort of get bumped out of being the intermediary? But shortly thereafter, a lot of the companies in the channel got really excited and the hype just took off and figuring out ways that we can take advantage of this new
yeah.
subscription type model and all of that and customers got excited too. And then we saw about year three, the beginning of year three, a kind of a pullback on that optimism. There was like a lot of realization about cost, about how hard it was to make money or profitability. And so we call it the reality check. And now we're humming along and people have kind of figured all of that out. But we're seeing the same thing, I'm sure, with AI. I'm expecting, you know, this year's there's a lot of hype still. But I would not be surprised if once more real implementations are happening, both the customer side and the provider side are going to start to realize the bumps in the road that you didn't anticipate. And there'll be a reset for sure. My
Mm,
prediction. Yeah.
okay. So right off the top, one of the things you kind of look into is how channel firms describe their primary business, and I thought that was fascinating because I talk about this from time to time on the podcast here, where I refer to it as the VAR hangover, but it seems like it's not actually a hangover just yet. It sounds like a lot of people still identify themselves as just little products resellers, effectively.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what's your take? Is this trend actually moving? And I would say positive direction would be the direction of maybe pure play or true business technology solutions providers, right? As opposed to strictly product resellers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is the direction that I think the industry needs to move and should move. And you're right about kind of the holdover of the legacy. And I think it has a lot to do with um, many of those companies that still identify as product resellers, for instance. A lot of those companies have been in the game a long time and they have older owners, they're smaller companies, and they've reached a point in their existence where radical change is really not for them. And they're still making good money doing what they're doing. And many of them have exit strategies that are coming up pretty soon. So they're going to be
Mm,
selling the business. And that's definitely, I mean, we asked one question on the study, very general, like what about the health of the channel? Where do you think the channel's at? Generally for all of you, not just your business. And literally like half and half. Half say it's the channel is healthy, but stable and status quo. And most of those companies are exactly like these product resellers who are doubling down on their existing portfolio, their existing customers, and they're staying the course. And then you've got exactly another half that say that the channel is, yes, healthy too, but changing rapidly. And this group is the group that is embracing AI, embracing, higher level cybersecurity services, getting into data and wanting to grow their business. And I feel like it's almost a generational thing at this point. There's, the companies that are older are not going to move at this point. And they still serve a purpose. I mean, there
Yeah.
are companies out there that are still buying a lot of hardware, et cetera. So that's the way I describe it. I mean, we have seen clearly that there are more companies now, if you count both those buckets of technology services companies and the more business solutions consultative companies, you add them together, it's almost 70% identify
Yeah.
that way. So, so yeah, but I think we're going to continue to see that product bunch for a while, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, the report on progress on business goals was interesting too, because the just from a visual perspective, it's pretty obvious that as the companies get larger, it seems the execution or the ability to execute is what drives
Mhm.
the perception of being on track with business goals. And so clearly, small companies still a little bit suffering from maybe inability to execute, inability to drive some of those things. And we hear this almost every quarter from service leadership when they put out the report. Anywhere between 28 to 32% of MSPs are losing money every quarter. And those tend to be maybe on the smaller side for the most part. So clearly, a company size related correlation there.
Yeah, I sometimes think about it in terms of, a small business sometimes it's just having to deal with the day to day
Mm,
and put out fires. They only have a few employees, and so they're constantly focusing on the issue at hand, and there's less long-term strategic thinking. That's not to say they can't do long-term strategic thinking at all. It's just more a matter of bandwidth and capacity. My dad ran a small business, and I could see that with him. He struggled with, building out, a year's targets that they wanted to meet, or even a 5-year plan which would have been grand. Um, because there was so much going on every single day. There was a fire to put out, and you
yeah.
didn't have, that many more employees who you could have the people who are putting out the fires, and you could have the people working on sort of the longer term goals.
Yeah, interesting. And that's a that's the part that I think you're right on the slow moving piece. This growth, especially in a service business, tends to take a long time. It takes
Yeah.
MSPs several years before they start to, hire their first employee, or even the third or fourth or fifth, and so on. And so that is an interesting trend that doesn't seem to change much in terms of
Yeah.
velocity. Yeah. We're saying some of the interesting, I guess, tendencies here on the things contributing to healthy channel or things diminishing the IT channel. And one of the things you talked about backstage was workforce skills shortage. And this, I mean, it feels like every trends report will talk about people are concerned about hiring. They can't find the right people, or they're just maybe not thinking about upskilling. Um, what is some of your insight here into this? Because especially with the fast-paced technology change, I feel like upskilling becomes more and more important. Cybersecurity is still
Yeah.
top of mind for everybody every year for the last 5 years. But what are
Mhm.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that the workforce issues are kind of perennial and they're always on everybody's lists. That's an issue. I will say though, for our study, workforce has never been at the number 2 spot in something that channel companies are worried about. And it is this year. And I think you can correlate that to the hype around AI, the much deeper need for skills beyond table stakes when it comes to cybersecurity.
Hmm.
And then, as you need AI skills, those go hand in hand with development skills and data skills. And that's never been a big area where the channel has played strongly. So I think there are a lot of channel companies who are really excited about these new opportunities around AI, and yet they do not have people in-house and they're struggling to find people outside who have the skill set that they can bring in. And the other issue is that they can afford because these types of skilled people are in deep demand right now everywhere outside of the tech industry. So a lot of channel firms may be competing to hire an AI developer or specialist or cybersecurity, whatever bucket it is, with a larger firm in a different industry that will obviously be able to pay a higher salary, better benefits package. It does
Mm.
come down to a competitive thing too. And so I think that a lot of the channel companies are kind of looking out on the horizon going, I don't know how I'm going to really compete hiring anew. And so it gets important to think about training and upskilling, as you mentioned. And that's one of the mitigations that channel companies can go down as opposed to trying to hire out in the field. They can try to get their employees that already are on staff up to speed.
Yeah, we see this at scale too, in a city center like Vancouver, where occasionally Amazon comes in with the ability to pay, wages that are way beyond what the market has typically paid for similar roles, and smaller businesses simply can't compete. And so, yeah, it definitely adds to the complications. But I thought this bit here was interesting that a lot more people are seeing competition from online marketplaces. And the insight maybe that I wanted to ask you about is whether you think some of this is kind of commoditization coming to a head now, finally, rearing its ugly teeth for MSPs that have not improved their ability to execute on the business outcome conversation or the relationship piece with customers. What are your thoughts on how online marketplace? Because I imagine this is a very commoditized service if it's on a marketplace, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Yeah, marketplaces have been really on the radar for the last 5 years. They've been very high up as the main competitor for a lot of channel companies. And you're right. I mean, it has everything to do with, commoditization and of course the impact that has on price. It's just cheaper and easier for many customers to go directly to a marketplace and get what they need, whether that's an application that they need, a SaaS app they want to buy, whether it's hardware, whether it truly is a difficult juggernaut to compete against if you're a smaller MSP or any kind of channel company. And I don't see that going away. These big online marketplaces aren't disappearing. Now,
Mm.
again, some channel firms have learned how to use them and be able to sell themselves on marketplaces. And you can do that not just with the Amazons of the world, but a lot of the broadline, the mainstream distributors like an Ingram Micro, or, they allow, their partners to work off of their own cloud marketplace. But it's definitely the world of distribution and online marketplaces has changed radically in the cloud era and has become a serious competitor for a lot of channel firms. Now, what I often suggest is that you most likely aren't going to beat them in all cases. I think to your point, this is your wake up call if you haven't already to get much more involved with your customers on their business outcomes, their goals, working with them in that consultative way. Because then you're valuable. Then you are much more valuable than Amazon is ever going to be to this particular customer because you're in there, you're getting to know their business, and you're making recommendations that are specific to their problems. And so there's an intimacy there that's really important. And that's one way to combat this, issue with the online marketplaces. The other thing is to build that relationship with customers and know and be okay with the fact that they may conduct a transaction with the marketplace, but that's all they conducted is the initial transaction to get whatever solution it was that they needed, whatever product set it is. But then you, as their, advisor, either help them pick out what they would go buy, and then you do all of the work after the fact. You do the integration work, you make sure whatever
Mm.
they bought is compliant and secure. And then if you're an MSP, you've got the ongoing management of those solutions for your customers. So I always tell companies not to freak out if their customer wants to go buy it the initial transaction within a marketplace, as long as you have created that relationship and can get the services on the front end and the back end, go ahead and let them do it. They're
Yeah.
going to any, you know.
Megan Killian of MKC Agency was on the show last week, and she made the point of calling out a bit of the generational shift to the buyer profile is changing. You know,
Yeah.
millennials and Gen Zs want to kind of interact on their own with the marketplaces before they talk to anybody. Do you guys track that sort of generational shift at all as part of the change to this metric?
Yeah, we haven't in this particular study. We do generational studies on use of technology, and we haven't done one in a couple of years, so I don't have anything data-wise to cite off the top of my head. But she's spot on, your guest. It's definitely true that the millennials and younger do a ton of their own research, and they interact with marketplaces, and they know exactly what everything costs and what they want to buy, and they've done a lot of that upfront work um,
Yeah,
before they choose to buy or before they, and if they engage with a MSP after the fact, they may already know exactly what they want and they've vetted it all out. But that doesn't mean that the MSP or other channel company doesn't have a place in that engagement. Because despite them being really good researchers of what they want to buy, it's what happens after the fact. Do they understand how to introduce a new application to an already running environment and what all of the moving parts and the connections have to be. And that's where the MSP can play a really strong role.
yeah, interesting. We're seeing that from a vendor perspective at ScalePad too, and it's a lot of what we're inculcating overall in conversations is rebuilding the relationship, trying to understand where in that customer life cycle we can have the most impact on business outcomes. Because you're right, like the whole commoditization piece has been really problematic now that MSPs kind of got beat over the head for 20 years about standardizing, and they forgot about maybe the negative aspects of standardization, which is that you kind of very much look inwardly to solve your operational issues and not so much externally to solve the customer's issues.
Right.
So the business lines, profit and revenue. Let me see what was interesting here in some of these. The business models. I think this is interesting because nowhere in the report could I find like whether you're opinionated on if pure play MSP is the place to go, the promised land, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I thought it was interesting that there was a lower number of pure play MSPs from last year or a
Yeah.
year ago to today. And what do you think is driving that? I guess maybe AI is considered a product in the context, and that's driving a lot of product resale again. And so, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've seen this, for many years now that, most MSPs identify as a hybrid role, and fewer this year as pure plays, as you said. I think AI has a lot to do with the number change this year, but the fact that many MSPs identify as hybrids has been uh, pretty consistent year over year. And I think it speaks to the fact that many of the MSPs transitioned from those resellers of old, if that we talked about earlier here. And so they had that they came from that world. And for many of them, they still will have a customer ask them to, buy hardware or whatever products, and they don't say no to that. So when we ask them, how would you account for your business, they'll check the boxes. Yes, we sell products. Yes, we'll do a project for, a start and stop project for a customer. And, yes, we're an MSP at the same time.
Mm,
And I think that speaks to a lot of them being legacy in their historically. Um, but I think you asked for my opinion. In terms of where we think like the holy grail is for MSPs, um, I think ideally you want to be as pure play as possible if you're running the MSP business well. But I also understand that desire to not have to say no to a customer and want to be able to fulfill some of those one-off needs that they may have additionally that you wouldn't count as recurring revenue, but more one-time revenue and transactions. So I sort of understand that. This has never flummoxed me why a lot of MSPs are still hybrid. I sort of understand that.
mm. Yeah, I suppose I've seen the extremes of it too. Vertical integration. Interestingly, there's an MSP I know that was doing a lot of work with, for example, commercial laundries, and they ended up buying the software that a lot of those commercial laundromats were running. And so now they're literally the owner of the software that they support and deliver as part of a larger managed services offering. And so it's interesting to see the MSPs that are kind of rotating into full verticalization of their
Yeah.
offering, versus even some that are pivoting away from any product whatsoever to truly just do, the 365 security or the 365 productivity consulting. So
Totally.
you were seeing all
Yeah.
the whole gamut, but the high profitability is certainly coming from either capturing all of it or having just the sliver of consulting, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah. I agree.
Revenue growth expectations. Now, this is a busy one here, but I think
Yeah.
cybersecurity still obviously not a big surprise. AI, top of the chart here. But what are some of the things that kind of maybe surprised you of the report this year in terms of revenue growth expectations?
Um, I think, I mean, there's not no huge surprises, other than for this audience in particular, you can see the managed services, the infrastructure. We define managed services as two types in our study. One is the more traditional infrastructure MSP that's just doing remote management and monitoring of networks and devices, pretty specifically. And then we have MSPs that we call the full service MSPs, for lack of a better descriptor. And they have moved into business applications and much more. They're handling higher level cybersecurity, et cetera, for their customers. So they're getting more into the software layer, I guess is the way you would put it. And they'd be the ones getting into more of the AI stuff also. Um, so the fact that the infrastructure folks, MSPs are down in the lower, is almost speaks to the commoditization thing that we got to before. These businesses now are kind of humming along, but until they start to add something new that's a little higher up the stack, their growth is probably going to be fairly predictable and not outrageously high. It's, probably going to be relatively flat. So that's something that we're seeing. Other than that, there are not a ton of surprises because all my expectations for the big revenue drivers are at the top,
Hmm.
as you can.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's see if we can sort of get close to. There was this other data piece that I thought was interesting, and maybe you can validate it from your side. But Peter Kujawa over at Service Leadership last towards the end of 2024 at IT Nation in Orlando, we're talking about there's an interesting sort of reduction in revenue growth expectations, but there is an increase in profitability growth expectations. And so that was maybe speaking to a bit of executing better,
Mhm.
just being a little bit more focused on the pure play services or the consulting aspect and things like that. But was curious if you were seeing some of the same trends.
Yeah, definitely. The companies who are getting better at operational efficiency, like you said, executing better, are definitely able to wring more profitability out of their business. And I certainly believe that it's coming more from that than it is coming from margin on the things that they're selling. That being said, there's probably a little combination of both. There are also more lucrative aspects of a business. So if you're adding more consulting services, for instance, the margins on those types of engagements are higher than, selling product, or just doing basic, monthly MSP type work for a company. So if you're adding those more higher level value services like consulting or getting into any of the newer emerging areas, you're going to make more profitability off that. But I would definitely give a lot of credit to companies wising up into getting more operationally efficient, maybe automating more of their processes. As MSPs start to introduce what we saw initially with AI was most companies were trying it out internally and seeing how, what they could do with it for their own business to make it run better. And it was only this year that we started to see more outside monetization of selling AI. So applying AI to some of, especially to MSP's business, to automate some of the rote tasks that are done every single day with your customers' networks, could certainly account for better profitability because of the cost savings that's going on there.
Yeah. I have my own correlation here, and it's that at least in the M&A context, it seems that there's still a reward for just the revenue number being bigger. And so we're still seeing companies come together simply to have the bigger revenue number. And that means potentially not letting go of any of that lower profitability revenue because it's still going to affect, the multiple at the end of the day by coming together.
Yep.
And so even if the profitability decreases at a higher revenue, it's still sort of being rewarded from a M&A perspective, it seems. But it seems that they're a little bit, the buyers are a little bit more nuanced in that conversation nowadays. They want to see some more nuance in the profitability. But I don't know. It seems to go in when people are rapidly buying other businesses, it seems like that care and nuance goes out the window. Of course, everybody just wants to buy more MSPs, and when they start to get a little more careful, maybe they care more about that, breakdown in revenue types inside the business. But I don't know if you track M&A and if this is one of the things that kind of provides insights into your report or not.
Well, we did a one M&A question just about, likelihood to sell, likelihood to buy this year. But spoiler alert, we have an M&A study unto itself that I'll be starting second half of the year this year. So that'll have more granularity to it. So maybe we can get back together and chat
All
all
right.
about M&A.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so maybe the big topic of the day and AI and not big because of the hype cycle anymore, but really sort of what people are actually starting to see now that we're 2-3 years into the actual implementation of this from a number of folks. Um, Revenue opportunity is so. Tell me about how you think, or how the respondents think about the revenue opportunity of AI. Is it simply, thumb in the wind type of thing, or are they actually tracking, CRM like type opportunity that they are seeing specific opportunity to actually go win and execute on?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think there's a little thumb in the wind for sure, because I still talk to plenty of MSPs and other channel companies who are still asking me like, What should I sell? How will I make money off this?" So I think, but the hype has everybody excited, right? The other thing that's happened is, as I said, a lot of the channel firms were using AI in the last 2 years internally, seeing what it could do for their business, make it more efficient. They're doing little pilot projects off to the side to learn how to use some of these tools. And I think this year in our data is showing that they're feeling much more confident with the use of AI. And so that confidence, I think, is then translating into revenue opportunity. We can go out there now and we can sell this, and I think there's money to be made. The other driver here, though, is customer demand is way up. So customers are asking about AI all the time because you can't really avoid the subject. Even a completely non-technical out there, customer out there still is hearing about AI anywhere they go. So they're asking questions about it. Some of them are outright know the products and the services and they're demanding it. And so that, of course, is given a lot of optimism to channel firms to think that, this is a big revenue opportunity for them coming up. Um, so, it's probably a combination of both. I don't know that there's like actual proof points that can show, at least not in our data, that the channel has tracked this in their CRM and they're getting, all kinds of pipeline based on AI. But I think it's probably a little combination of optimism based on the hype and um, getting better skills and feeling more credible and able to go to market with these types of solutions.
Yeah. This one was interesting too. 59% of respondents here feel that it's primarily still an efficiency driver over the next 12 months, which kind of speaks to a bit of it's just helping me do things a little faster. It's helping me automate a couple, little things that we might be doing internally,
Yeah.
but maybe people not really squarely on the revenue side of the opportunity of AI. And maybe that's a little bit of where the agentic piece comes into play later on. But what are your thoughts there? Because efficiency is, I think, a big part of creating opportunities for driving revenue. And so, like, what's
Yeah.
the disconnect there?
I think it's still the learning curve, quite honestly. I think the other thing is for some channel firms, AI is um, not a product And so for those who kind of get stuck in a mindset of like, what are we selling? Like, what sort of tangible item are we selling to our customer? I mean, there are AI products, but a lot of what AI is an enabling piece to
Yeah.
something else. And so that's not, you're not leading with that. You can say, I'm selling you something that has an AI component to it. And so I think that for a lot of more traditional salespeople and companies in the channel, they've got to reorient how they sell this sort of thing. And what I've found is some of the companies out there have decided that, we're not selling things, we're going to go in and consult on AI. And I think that's been a good first step for a lot of companies, is to go in and help their customers figure out what AI is all about for them and what business use it could be for them. And clearly that's one of the early starting points for a lot of channel companies when it comes to AI as a revenue producer.
Yeah, automating of functions here is still a big piece. I do see, the occasional MSP offering things like actual business process optimization type of
Yeah.
services, like actually converting into a revenue driving type of service or product.
Hmm.
But it's kind of, the AI piece is behind the scenes of that. It's really a bit of that business consulting piece that drives that for sure. The skills shortage too. Obviously, AI I think is going to drive a bit of that. But the hiring expectations continue to increase, and I think this is maybe a point of frustration every time I have a conversation with MSPs about hiring. Is it
Yeah.
seems like the ability to hire entry level folks is diminishing. It's harder to hire entry level folks because the requirements at all levels of the business are higher. But what's your sense here from what you're seeing?
Yeah. Oh, so on entry level, like what I wonder is when we always discuss AI and the worker and what it's going to do to the workforce, is that I believe that they're going to be the AI's place in the workforce initially is going to be at that entry level, the lowest hanging fruit of skills that are needed. And so you're right, the next level of person, the first humans you might be hiring into your organization are going to need a higher level of skill. Um, and hopefully, the computer science programs and boot camps and everything out there they're going to evolve to reflect that. And so they'll be teaching, higher level skills right out of the gate with some of the younger students. And, that remains to be seen.
Hmm.
But I think to my earlier point, I think a lot of companies are going to have to face the fact that their best bet is to work with their existing workforce and, make the investment in upskilling them and retraining them. Even if you can choose, among your best employees and think this person has the right foundational skills to take it to the next level with what we need in cybersecurity or what we need with AI and, get them the training that they need. That seems to me to be, it's not necessarily cheaper to go that route. Costs a lot to go out and try to hire people, but it also costs a lot to train people. But it may be the more successful way to go if you're struggling to find people out there.
Yeah, I was actually when I was reading through it, I was surprised to see a quote I'd provided made it into the report. You never
It
know when
did.
when they actually
Yes,
make it
there
into
you
the
are.
report. But I'm strongly opinionated on this, and it's that I think the hiring of people into the MSP industry is going to really require more of that business acumen, the discernment, the
Hmm.
things that help you leverage AI to do bigger and better, more powerful things, as opposed to just purely tech skills. And we've been on this trend. Hire for culture, hire for attitude. The tech skills can be taught. I think the tech skills will no longer need to be taught. You just need to have a bit of that awareness, situational know-how, and context, and then more importantly, the relationship piece and the discernment of the things that are going to drive business outcomes for customers.
Yeah.
How that all plays out in the long term is, I guess we'll see, because there's still the reality that we still need to do all the basic things, keep the lights on type of work, the road tasks as you call them. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really the challenge, is like, how do you balance that, and whether you can rise above just being mired in the day-to-day work overall. But
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
so let me see what else was interesting here. I wanted to maybe ask you a question about. Oh, did I close the report here? One second. Let me just change the. I had some notes
Sure.
here. Let me see if we can get this back up here. To see to the channel. Let me see if this switches back over properly or if I have to.
Yeah, I
There it
see
is.
it.
Yep.
It's small, but I can,
Yeah. Let me zoom back into that.
yeah, my eyes are not what they used to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're all in that same boat, Carolyn. Okay. Um, Let me just get to some of the other interesting bits here. We were talking about a skills shortage. This one was an interesting thing. Yeah, that skill shortage. I did have a couple of questions actually on the AI piece, and I think the obviously the revenue growth projections increase for AI. Some of the
Mhm.
reasons are pretty obvious. We've talked about them. People just settling into the technology a little bit better, understanding how they're going to position a service around the offering. I still hearing a lot of people saying, "Oh, yeah, let's not even focus on that just yet." Kind of encouraging customers to just they feel like they're still in the hype cycle and that the customer should wait a little bit longer. Um, it's not inexpensive. It's $20, $30 a seat to turn on Copilot for an organization.
Yep.
And many businesses maybe still don't know how to realize $30 a month times however many employees they have for a very small percentage that are going to use it well. And so there's
Mhm.
this whole like upskilling piece in the actual workforce of the end customer that is a concern. And I don't think a
Yeah.
lot of MSPs are doing that piece. They're kind of just doing a little bit of here's some of the opportunities of things you could do, but not necessarily actually doing training. Where do you think the end
Yeah.
customers are getting, know-how on this overall?
We always encourage MSPs and channel firms to take user education seriously because it might be, the best way to sell your customer on something is to really show them how to use these tools and what benefits they would get out of them. So, because so much you sell software wise, most end user is using what, 10, 20% of the functionality of a particular application at any time.
Tops.
I'm guilty. I'm totally guilty of that as well. So with AI, you're right. It's not cheap to turn on Copilot, and I've been in organizations using Copilot, and I'd say a fraction of people actually use it, and a fraction of that fraction are only using it, to its full capacity. And so, be smart. If you really are trying to push these types of solutions, the best way to do that is to really show users what they can get out of it. And it almost does become a training and an education piece, and you can charge consulting fees for that, so it's lucrative too. But that's, I think, a better sales tool than, like you said, just describing something as cool to these customers and something like everybody else has it. You should have this now too, but really get in and show them what they can do with it at an individual user level. And that may help make the case for some customers to be convinced.
Yeah. Now the vendor relations was another interesting bit. Because I do see a trend of consolidation of vendors for a lot of MSPs. They want fewer relationships.
Yeah.
At the same time, I feel like, and this is very much a thumb in the wind thing. So you can maybe help me nuance the discussion a little bit, but it feels like a lot of vendors coming into the channel will kind of spin up very superficial feeling programs, not to the depth and or breadth of what a program maybe used to be 10 years ago for somebody
Hmm.
working with a vendor. But what is your sense on this reduction in number of vendors or the desire to consolidate, and how vendors are going to market in terms of their partner programs?
Yeah. Well, this question is a tracking question we've done for 12 years now. Just it's very simple. How many partner programs does your company participate in formally? Meaning you're signed up, you're engaged, um, and you have an investment in it. You're paying into it. You've accessed the incentives and the benefits that you can get from that program. And typically that's been 15 to 20 programs for 10 years. And then the last two years, we've seen a drop in the number of total programs that companies say that they're formally enrolled in. And part of that, I think, is to your point. There is a fatigue almost, or in trying to manage, especially, the average size channel firm is 10 employees. And nobody is dedicated full time to managing the vendor relationships typically within that organization. It's the owner or the head of sales, and so um that became cumbersome, and a lot of companies woke up to the fact that we're enrolled in this program, we get nothing out of it because we can't pay attention to this all of so they're not paying attention to the fire hose of information coming from every program they're in, and they've started to cut down on them, and they've started to figure out that where are we making most of our money, what are the vendors that we believe are leading in the marketplace and are strategic, are going to make us the most money, and that we feel like we can fit into whatever portfolio that we are comfortable with, what we sell, what our sweet spot is. And they're consolidating, like you said, down to fewer vendors. They're still working with, a lot of vendors, but fewer across the board. And part of it is like a quality over quantity thing, just very basic quality over quantity, and wanting to have more strategic, tighter relationships with the vendors that you work with. So everybody's winning and getting something out of that. And then dump the extraneous ones that you don't need anymore or that you're getting very minimal benefit out of. Um, it makes a lot of sense to me. And, it bears out in the satisfaction ratings that we also asked about this year, is that, the level of satisfaction that channel partners profess to feel toward their vendor relationships has gone way up. And so they're happier with fewer. And it makes sense. You can devote more time and more energy and reap more benefits from a few vendors than you can from 20.
Yeah. Yeah. Online marketplaces making an appearance here, of course.
Yes.
The marketplaces are definitely consolidating vendors for the MSPs, and then maybe that feels like a consolidation, but simply because it optimizes a bit of the billing and the provisioning and some of the things that I know are the painful piece of having multiple vendors. So that's a clear winner there too, for sure. I think as we expand the view to global markets, do you find that the trends just maybe you have a little bit of lag in other geos, but for the most part follow a bit of the same tendencies? Or are you seeing any unique departure from the North America tendencies in other markets?
Yeah, for the most part, the North American market leads in especially newer things and moving towards services and that sort of thing. But the other regions are following steadily behind. There's not a tremendous deviation in the data. Now, I don't have all of the regions in my head, I will be honest with you, but if you would like to share them with anyone, there's plenty of that data right on our website. I'm trying to think of any real big outliers that were different from the North American data. For the most part, sort of the UK and Ireland sort of follow suit pretty well. All the European countries are kind of following suit. Again, like just slightly behind. If you looked at something like the AI numbers that we talked about, the number of companies that are expecting a huge increase in revenue this coming year with AI is less across the board in all of those regions than it is in the United States, but it did grow. So the patterns are fairly similar, but slower.
Hmm, interesting. Um, I think AI is going to continue dominating a lot of the conversation going forward. And I kind of skipped over it, but there was the whole agentic piece. And I believe that was, let me see if it was further down in the AI section. Yeah, agentic AI. And so this is an interesting one. I had a brief conversation with somebody not too long ago that I think MSPs are going to be very hesitant to replace entire people with an agentic AI, even if it knows the entire history of tickets for a customer really well, because
Yeah.
the at the same time as this is creating some interesting efficiencies, I think they're also realizing that this may actually erode relationships in a way that is negative and counterproductive to their growth and to the ability to actually do interesting business outcome type of things with technology for the
Uh-huh.
customers. And so it's kind of ironic that it might actually be a negative thing for MSPs overall in the long term. But what are your thoughts on the agentic AI?
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's a very cool technology, right? But I think you could put it high on the list of one of those things that people worry about in terms of taking jobs, in terms of, diminishing the need and value in a provider like a channel company or an MSP. So I can completely understand why an MSP might be reluctant to go full on agentic AI, because I think it does like we discussed earlier with online marketplaces, that's removing the channel provider from some of the transactions because customers can go direct there. So where is your value? Your value is in those relationships, working with the customer on business outcomes, working with the customer on pain points, and really getting to know their business. And if you start applying technology like agentic, which is everybody's hands off, and like you said, they kind of learn the history of every customer and every transaction, and they can then replicate it and learn on that. Yeah, that's a little daunting. And so I don't know that we can stop this, as a technology, because again, it is very cool, and I'm sure we'll have some amazing uses in other industries in particular. But yeah, I can see the trepidation on the MSP side, 100%.
Yeah. Wow. Lots of insights and impossible to go through all, quite literally all the bits of data that are interesting there. But where can people go find this report online? Obviously, GTIA has its new brand. It's now at gtia.org. But where can people go find this report?
Well, they can find it there. So that would be the best and easiest place is to go to gtia.org, the resources page, and there's a whole section with research. So you can access the report there. You can also find 5 individual shorter reports for each of those geographic regions that we discussed. So if you're listening here from another place other than North America and you'd like to look up your region's data, you can find that there as well. So there's different breakouts. All the charts that we were talking about today, we have them based on individual data from those regions. So that's pretty cool if you're from another place. And yeah, that's the best place to go find it. You can Google it too, and it'll pop up. But best place to go is the website.
Awesome. Well, Carolyn, thank you again so much. Always great to have your insights and allow me to indulge a bit in my curiosities about some of the data. So thank you for coming to hang out for a little bit. Thanks to GTIA for lending us your time. And maybe we'll get together on that other bit of data that you were researching on the M&A piece. I think that would be super interesting to be debrief as you get deeper into the respondents
Yeah.
and surveys and such. But until then, folks, we're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for MSP Confidential. This has been Carolyn April, VP of Research and Market Intelligence at the Global Technology Industry Association. Carolyn, thank you so much again, and we'll see everybody next week. Hang out backstage for 2 moments, and I'll be right with you. Talk to you soon.